I'm a mess. It is day something of quarantine. Hold on. Realistically, Saturday was day 7. Sunday was day 8. So today is day 9. I only have a couple more days. Yeah, a couple more days left. I have 5 days left. And yeah, it's what time is it? It is 20 past 10 or 10:27. 27? It's not as fun as you think it would be when you've had to leave like 70% of your possessions in another country. I miss having my art supplies. I miss having just access to whatever I wanted. I realize I'm spoiled saying this. I brought books and I brought other things with me, and I just can't be bothered using what I brought. I just want everything that I could not bring. So yeah, I'm spoiled. Anyway, unfortunately for me, I'm starting to think that the world doesn't want me to have a YouTube channel because the editing software that I usually use, Lightworks, was acting really slow for me, and I realized that there was an update available on the website. So to be fair, I downloaded the version I had in 2017 and it is now 2021. So I was using a 4-year-old software, found that there was an update available, tried installing that. It corrupted my system, so I had to use a command code thing. I might put it on the screen, I don't know. But that was fun because I had to leave that run for like 5 hours and fix my system. And then to top it all off, you got a weird camera angle because I needed to put my camera somewhere, my phone somewhere, but my little tripod decided to give up, and this happened. So yeah, we're using the other 2 legs of the tripod against medicine boxes in my medicine cabinet, which is why we have such a weird angle, which is why if I move too far forward, I'm in shadow, and too far back, I'm in light again. So fun. I started my training today with Chungdahm, and without revealing too much, it's basically you have a trainer, they tell you what to do, and then you do like mock teaching. And that's all it is. If you've ever done TESOL classes or if you've done in-class TEFL, then this is pretty much the same thing, which I think is a good thing because I've done this before, so I should be okay. But at the same time, I feel like there's an extra expectation of me to do well because I've done this before. I'm gonna change the camera angle. I'm just terrified in case my phone falls on top of me. We're gonna start from the start, actually. So, obviously moving during a pandemic is not ideal, and I would not recommend it, especially if you're moving during the COVID-19 pandemic, because you have to go for COVID tests, which involves them swabbing the inside of your nose and the back of your throat, neither of which are very comfortable experiences. In fact, you might say that they're uncomfortable experiences, and you have to get them done several times. So, yeah, funny story. I decided to fly with KLM, the Dutch airline, because they had a really good deal if you signed up as a Flying Blue member. So you got a small percentage off your seats and off the flight and all that kind of stuff. And you know, it was a really comfortable flight. I was able to book my own seat and everything. It was really good. That wasn't an issue. It was the fact that because I was going to be doing my layover in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam wanted to crack down on COVID cases, they introduced a second antigen test for COVID before you were allowed to board the plane. So already I had to get a COVID test before I was allowed onto the plane to go to Korea, but now I had to get a second test the morning of my flight so I could land in Amsterdam. That was not nice. The first test was lovely. The person doing the test for me was super nice. I told him I was nervous. I told him I have a really sensitive gag reflex, and he said, it's okay, don't worry about it. We're gonna take our time. We'll get it done. We'll just get it done out of the way. And he was super gentle about it. And yeah, he kind of scraped the back of my throat first of all, and then shoved it up my nose a bit. And that was it. It was lovely. It was fine. And then the antigen test was something else. My nose still hurts thinking about it. It was horrible. We got up to the airport for 10:30 in the morning because my flight was leaving at 1:25 p.m. So I had to work out. The test had to be done within 4 hours, and I had to have the results before I could check in. I'm an English teacher, not a maths teacher. So we had to get up to Dublin Airport for 10:30 so I could get my second test done. And the guy asked, have you had a test done before? And I said, yes, on Wednesday, thinking it was going to be the same super easy, fun time that it was. And he assured me, this is just a nose swab. I thought, oh, this is great. Oh my God. He went up and up some more, and he found a small little scoosh and like went down and up. My nose burned afterwards. And of course my mother, because she was sitting in the front seat of the car, she was able to watch. She was absolutely mortified. She started crying afterwards because it was horrible, absolutely horrible. I cried afterwards. It was disgusting. And the guy actually apologized. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, it was so bad. But then it was cool because I got into the queue to check in and everything seemed fine. There was another guy, a native Korean, just trying to get home in the queue behind me. And there was a lady walking through the queue, making sure we had both COVID exams. And his COVID test, the PCR test, was apparently out of date by 4 minutes. She had to make some phone calls. She wasn't going to let him on the plane. And she told him the next time he wants to travel to South Korea, he has to make sure his test is in date. And he was just staring at her like, I'm going home. It was so confusing. It was so stupid. I felt so bad for him. But yeah, so we landed then in Amsterdam. And that was fun because getting off the plane, we were literally walking. So this is funny. This is my first time being like properly out of Ireland. I've only ever been to England before. So I've only ever been on small planes, and those small planes were Ryanair or Aer Lingus, which meant that they were small enough they didn't have to have like the big tunnel things going up to the door. You'd walk out onto the actual concrete to get to the door to climb up the steps to get in. So when I was suddenly walking through these like proper tunnels, I felt like I was in a movie. It was so cool. I was just like, oh my god, look at me. I'm putting my little suitcase behind me. Look at my travel bag. And look at me getting into this like amazing tunnel. It was so cool. But then it was really stressful, I guess, because when we landed in Amsterdam, we're getting off the plane. So we're doing the reverse. We're walking back through the tunnel thing up into the airport. And we were walking up, and at the entrance to the airport, so like where you get out of the tunnel thing to get into the airport, there were 2 ladies, and they were checking to see that you had the antigen test and that it was negative. So I was frantically trying to connect to the Wi-Fi to get the email back up to get into it. I was like, oh my god. But that was fine, and I was able to find some sockets, charge my phone. I went and got McDonald's. Their strawberry milkshake was amazing. It is the best strawberry milkshake I've ever had in my life. That's a side note, but it was just absolutely amazing. Also, the mayo chicken I had was nice. It wasn't called a mayo chicken. I think it was called a mac chicken. But it was still super cheap. Even for airport food, it was still super cheap. Nothing was open because of COVID. Everything was closed. Absolutely everything was closed. There were no bars open. There weren't any of the perfume shops open or anything like that. Everything. Actually, no, perfume shops were open. They didn't have any makeup open, but they had perfume. Kind of thinking, I don't know, if you're gonna have one kind of, I would call perfume a cosmetic item. You don't necessarily need makeup. You could call deodorant a hygiene product, but perfume is extra. So I call that cosmetic, the same as makeup. I walked all around the airport in Schiphol, I think that's how you pronounce it, Schiphol, and yeah, nothing was open, so that was interesting. And then I boarded my nighttime flight to Korea. That was really interesting because there are so many extra seats in that plane. There's a row of 4 seats extra in the middle of the plane. I walked past my seat because I thought there's no way I'm this high up. There's no way I'm this far forward. But I walked past my seat because I didn't realize that, yeah, that was actually the seat I paid for. I paid extra money for the seat. And the whole point of me paying extra money for the seat was, number one, I wanted a window view so I could record what was out the window, which I did, and I'll include that either in this video or another video, I don't know. It'll appear somewhere at some point. But also, I wanted to be the first person off the plane so that I could get through immigration pretty quickly so that I would have less issues when I landed in Korea. Which worked kind of, sorta, except for the fact that because of COVID and everything, because of social distancing, they restricted how many people could actually board the flight. And then because of how many people were boarding the flight, I think for a plane that could hold 260 people, we had less than 60 people on board. And the captain actually said, as we were taxiing, so the part for people who've never been on a plane, my brother being one of those people, taxiing is when the plane leaves the airport building itself and makes its way to the runway to take off. So that it's called taxiing because you're only moving from one place to the other. You're not actually taking off or flying, you're just driving. While we were taxiing, the captain actually told us that because of the smaller amount of people on the plane, they've had to work out with engineers the aerodynamics. So everybody was assigned a seat based on how they needed to be arranged for the aerodynamics of the plane to take off and land properly. And this girl, a foreign exchange student, I think she could have been from France. She was speaking French, but I'm not entirely sure. But she asked one of the air hostess, you're not meant to call them air hostess, are you meant to call them stewards? One of the lovely staff members, if she could move her seat, or if she could change seat, should I say. And they said, yeah, after takeoff. So after takeoff, she moved right behind me, and the first thing she did, she moved into the seat right behind me. Not even to the row behind me, the seat right behind me. The first thing she did was put her feet up on my seat and push. I was so irritated the entire flight. She kept kicking. I kept looking back at her, and she was just at me. I was I was so close to slapping her face because it was a stupid face and she knew she was being a jerk the entire 10-hour flight. It was horrible. She also kind of kept making a mess, and she kept, at one point, I think she spilled her food on herself. And then at one point I kind of felt bad for her because I thought, imagine if this is her first flight as well. I've been preparing for this, and I've been watching YouTube videos, I've been asking people appropriate questions, so I knew how to act on the plane, I knew what to expect. But if she didn't have all that preparation, this is why she's panicking so much maybe. But I lost any kind of pity for her when she kept kicking my seat. There was no reason for it. It was just horrible. Landing here in Korea then was interesting because immigration and customs is very different now. So I don't know what it was like before. Obviously, I've never been here before COVID, but we got off the plane. We were greeted by Korean staff members, which was amazing. To hear Korean like in person after watching it in media forms for the past like what? 7 or 8 years. It was incredible. I was just like, this, oh my god. But yes, we were greeted by Korean staff members, and that was brilliant, and they brought us over to the right place. And I'm such a little nerd. I got this little envelope that says memories from February of 2020, and this is all the stuff I needed to use on the plane. So, strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, yeah, this is my flight ticket. Look at that boarding pass, it's so cool. And this is to say I have 2 pieces of luggage that I paid for. This was my receipt. I had to pay extra for my luggage. I basically paid the same as I would for an extra suitcase, €100. Why didn't I just put in an extra suitcase? Anyway, that's those 2 things. On the plane, they gave us this little arrival card, which is pretty cool. And on this, they ask for your name, your gender, your nationality, your date of birth. And now it said your occupation, and it says your occupation or your job in your country. So I wrote down that I was in retail because I was in retail back home. But then the lady I asked on the plane said, write down what you're doing here, which is obviously teaching, but that's not what I was doing back home, so I don't know. And then it asks for your address in Korea. So didn't realize at the time I should have written it down in Korean. I wrote it down in English, but that was fine. And then the last thing they ask you is your purpose, the purpose of your visit, which of course for me was employment. They had another entry thing, an immigration card, I believe, and it was kind of like customs. So they were asking if you're bringing in any kind of meat, any kind of like cattle or poultry, any kind of like live animals, things like that. They didn't ask about like just general foodstuffs or snacks, which I brought with me in my carry-on, and it was screened several times and nobody said anything, which was great. So yeah, that was cool. And then the last thing they gave me on the physical plane was this little yellow slip of paper about COVID-19 symptoms, and you had to say that you didn't have any symptoms, basically. Further to this, when I was in Amsterdam, before we were told what gate to board at, because of how strict Korea is, we had to fill out this other form. And this form here is a basic health assessment. So you're just kind of filling out the same forms over and over again, just to say that you haven't any symptoms, that you haven't had any contact with anybody with COVID. You write down your flight number and then your name, and then just sign it. And then they told you what gate you were going to, so I had to go to gate 8. I had to go to gate E22, which was cool. You had to show your COVID results several times. So I had this is just to say that I had my PCR test and it was negative. And then I also had this one, which was to say that I'd been screened when I entered the airport. So they checked my temperature and everything, and I was, even though I was sweating like mad, I still only clocked in at 36.8 degrees Celsius. So if you're anything over 37.5, that's classed as a fever, and that's a COVID symptom. You've got to be at the airport. What they do is if your temperature is more than 37.5 degrees, they actually keep you at the airport for the 12 hours it takes to have a PCR test conducted, which is obviously as nice as you can imagine it being, having to wait at the airport for 12 hours. I did not have to do this. I got to leave straight away. I was very happy. However, yeah, it wasn't the best, because I was recommended by my boss to get a SIM card at the airport, which was something I planned to do anyway. I thought if I landed in the correct terminal, I'd find the SIM card booth and I'd be able to buy myself a SIM card, so I'd have a Korean number immediately. That is not what happened. Basically, after I went through immigration, I got this little piece of paper to say that I'm allowed to stay in the country until March of 2022. I was asked, how am I getting to my quarantine address? And I said, by bus. To which everybody freaked out. They all, bus! And they all like just, it was funny because there was one guy I was talking to initially and he freaked out about me saying bus and like directed me to this other man who then freaked out about the bus situation, who directed me to another man, and they kept directing me to other people. And eventually this guy freaked out because I needed to come to downtown, which is where I am at the moment, and they were freaking out about, it was so funny, they were freaking out about getting me here and everything and getting the bus in time. This is the stub for my ticket on the bus. Yeah, so I wasn't allowed to stop at the airport. I had to go straight to the bus. I was the only person on the bus, and they brought me to Hwaesong, which is the city I'm in. And then I had to get a quarantine taxi, which was really fun because nobody wanted to help me get my suitcases into the taxi, so I had to do that by myself. Eventually the men realized, oh wait, this really scrawny chicken-armed girl can't lift her own suitcases. We've got to give her a hand. But then they put them standing up even though my suitcases were rolling cases. So when we started driving, they rolled against the door. When we arrived to my apartment building, the taxi driver just opened the door so that my case fell out onto the street, and then by the time I went and picked it up and got my other case out, he just drove away when I had all my stuff out. I didn't know where I was. I couldn't find the way. I couldn't push my suitcases by myself on the uneven footpath. A random guy pulled in right in front of me with his like minivan and started like, he grabbed my suitcases and started walking. I was like, oh, where are you going? And he said, where are you going? And I was like, oh my god, thank you. I thought the entrance was around the corner, so I got him to help me bring my cases around the corner. Realized I'd gone too far, had to push my cases by myself back up a small hill, back around the corner. It was mayhem. I broke fingernails. I broke my spirit. I got into the apartment and I just broke down crying. I was like, this is a shambles. What have I done? I don't understand people here properly. I understand bits, but I can't communicate back. People don't understand me. It was just... It was a difficult first evening. I honestly, I was debating just like, calling my parents and telling them, hey, I'm gonna get a plane home, I'm not able to do this. Which of course would have been really disappointing because it saved money for this. I put time into this, I put effort into this. So I'm really happy that I didn't kind of, pander to the panic. I had a similar episode the following evening. I just broke down, completely I just randomly completely broke down. I think it's part of like jet lag. This video is all over the place.